technical unit here tells us that one of the earphone systems has not been returned. If any of you see an earphone unit, מצאתם? יופי. Our last session has been designed kind of like more like a media session with questions that will be put to our panel. We would like to engage the participants, all of you, as much as possible with comments or questions during this session. And I shall begin. And we'll begin with a subject that always brings, at least in Israel, a smile to everyone's face: university ranking systems. The European Commission recently announced the introduction of its new university ranking system entitled EU Multi-Rank. The Commission has claimed that the multi-rank will eliminate many of the flaws in existing ranking systems, such as lack of transparency. The system has many critics, and some critics of the new system say that it is essentially a reaction to the poor performance of mainland European universities in the existing ranking systems as compared with the Anglo-Saxon countries. I would just like to read out a short part of one critical reaction to the new system. There is a group known as LERU, L-E-R-U, the leading European research universities, and they announced a couple of months ago that they would not participate in the new ranking system. Ostensibly, this is because the ranking system is ill-conceived and badly designed, but really it's because they don't like rankings in which they don't come out on top. Now, I'm putting this whole issue to the panel, and we would like to hear your comments on this. I'd like to begin with our European colleagues, Professor Zagaga and Melita first, and then our Israeli colleagues.
Well, if this is an issue which brings a smile on Israeli faces, then what to say? Personally, I join you guys smiling. I'm not, at least personally, I do not belong to those fundamentalists in this area, in this domain. And that's true, that to produce a new speculative system of rankings do not contribute, at least not to famous continental European criticisms that all rankings are speculative. That's true. I think, on the other hand, basically I do not have much sympathy for other rankings worldwide. However, maybe that I can use here, that I can quote here Professor Kovacevic words from previous session about diversity. So Europe was very diverse before Bologna, and what it is now, she says, it is diverse again. I think it is not the same diversity. I will come to the issue of quality very soon. Namely, I would say there is reflected diversity and unreflected diversity. 15 years ago, we didn't know that we don't know how diverse European higher education systems are. And this is the contribution of league tables, of rankings. So I have a number of doubts, skepticism about Shanghai, about Times Higher Education, and so on. However, the positive part is that these issues are now in the front, that methodologies are critically observed. I hope that one day, not very late, we will have better methodologies and so on. And in this sense, the contribution of the EU multi-rank is an important contribution as well. Of course, with all due criticism.
Thank you. Anita?
Okay. Sorry. Okay, instead of giving direct answer, I'll try to give you some facts. So one thing is I was mentioning the number of research universities being involved or being members of Council for Doctoral Education. Not all of 240 that are members are intensive research universities, and not that all research universities are involved. But what is interesting, if you, and you're familiar with the United States system, if you ask American universities how many of research universities you have, they will tell you about 250. If you ask how many intensive research universities you have, they will tell you 70, 75. How many universities altogether, again, number goes in a couple of thousands. If you ask European universities, how many of you are research universities, all 2,000 or 3,000 will tell you we are research universities. So the issue of diversification of higher education system is a big issue. Everyone knows that it's there, but no one dares at the moment to go further and to make some kind of distinction between the system. So this is one of the things. The second thing is European University Association just had an annual conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the topic was ranking, and EUA published the second book, analysis of different ranking systems, pros and cons, or advantages and disadvantages of different. And my recommendation is maybe to look at this one. The fact is that we are all aware that one side we do have a rankings and we cannot avoid it. Many of us, when I say us, whoever, systems, institutions, countries, they don't like it. But at the same time, you know, the fact is that you have a rankings and that it means something. And this is a question how to deal and how to do it. However, there is one feature of all the existing rankings, and it goes back to research per se, whatever are the features of research and impacts of research. The difference with multi-ranking, one of the things is that wants to reach a different features and missions of universities, like regional impact, teaching fact, etc. So we go back and we are kind of in a vicious circle. Yes, research is extremely important. What is the mission of university? Knowledge. To education, like as one of the part of triangles. So how good we are in education and transmission of knowledge to new generations of people. Is this something like a quotation sign between being a good researcher and being a good educator, or vice versa, or whatever? So I mean, multi-ranking, as again, I'm not one who is either defending or offending the system, but it is a mission or try to answer to those issues as well. Again, and this is where I will stop, the question is actually, yes, we need a good research. Personally, I don't believe it that university could be just teaching without research, but probably different levels or forms of research could be part of educational, higher educational system. And then is, of course, question how we will recognize the quality beyond research. Is it multi-ranking or something else? But I think, again, if you take the diversity of education, if you take the number of countries and institutions, I would say this is a definitely relevant aspect that we have to take care of.
Ladies first, yes.
Yes.
I was last year in a conference that was devoted to rankings, and I was amazed to learn that there are more than 50 ranking tables of universities. And there is a special now research institute in Germany that is devoted in order to kind of harmonize some of these ranking tables. What I can say is that even if we don't like them, they are like globalization and other trends that are taking place now all over the world. They are here to stay, the ranking tables. Just a little story. Yesterday, a cousin of my husband called me. They are right now working in NIH in Washington, D.C., and she knows that I am dealing with higher education. And she said, is it true that the Hebrew University is just the place 120 in the ranking of Shanghai? So it's something that there is in the air. We are not going to abolish it. And I think we should use the ranking tables, the multi-ranking and the other ranking tables for good things. Here in Israel, I would say, it's most important for moving on to more globalization, because we are talking, if there are going to be a question, so we are still not in this area. We don't have accreditation, collaboration, we're not teaching so much English programs that are enabling students and faculty to come. None of our universities can be entitled as a world-class university. So there are things that we can take from these ranking tables that are not going to be abolished, even if we don't like them, for the good of our system.
Thank you. The Technion was actually involved in the pilot of the U multi-rank process, and so I was quite involved in also organizing the information and attended a couple of meetings in Brussels on the topic. And the idea, the concept, I think is very attractive, that you have a whole lot of indicators, and that depending on the user's need, you find the vector that reflects what your interests are, and therefore you get the ranking that way. But I must admit, I was rather disappointed that at the last meeting, when the indicators were being discussed and how you actually can measure the various aspects, it sounded like, and this was a year ago, maybe something's happened in the meantime, but they really didn't have good measures of hardly any of the features. So, I'm a statistician by training, and if your data in is not up to scratch, then the data out is not very useful. So I'm still a skeptic. And yes, we participate in all the ranking programs, and we make sure that they get all the information. As you said, as the others said, it's here to stay. But and I think, as I said, the concept is great. I'm not convinced about the implementation.
Does anyone in the audience have any comments or questions you'd like to put to the panel, or any comments you'd like to make on this subject? Yes, please.
Moshe Schneer from Oranim College in Israel. I have two questions in two different areas to the panel. I don't know who will answer. First of all, the place of this, I was very, very inspired by what you said and what you said begin. And it is fantastic. And sometimes I dream that I would go out of this hotel and I see myself in the green landscape of Slovenia, but I find myself in the Middle East, middle of this troubled area. And so what is the place of this process, in place of building New Europe, time when there is a mass immigration of people from Islamic world, and how it plays a role in creating this kind of integration or bridge between all European society or population and newcomers to Europe, and also what it can be the place of this process here in Israel and in the Middle East, and creating some kind of bridges between us and the Palestinians and Jordanians. We are dreaming to have the possibility of exchange of students between us and Jordan, for example, but it's impossible right now. So how do you see the place of the Bologna process in building Europe in the 21st century, or the Middle East in the 21st century?
I mentioned when I was giving the talk that there are different platforms that European Commission supporting, and there are different platforms like Europe, Asia cooperation, Europe, Latin America. There was recently a big conference 2 weeks ago on platform Europe Arabic universities collaboration. So I mean, there are really lots of energy put into making bridges and see what kind of collaborations could be done. At the same time, I would say it seems that, as you probably know, European education got much bigger budget this year than it used to be in a previous fiscal year. So I mean, all those instruments, on one side you see strategical thinking, policy making, platforms which brings people to communicate, to share experiences, finances. So I'm quite a bit positive about this. Of course, the process itself is not, again, balanced, and you don't see maybe the changes and improvements the way we would all like to see, and not quick enough, not embracing as many people as we would like, but I think that there are quite positive platforms to do that. And And one of the ways of doing this, I would say, is really to share information, to disseminate mutual understanding, both understanding cultures and see who is functioning how, what is important. So I would say any kind of meetings like this, and it could be in a smaller scale, bigger scale, I think definitely it helps a lot. And I think that this is a mission, and I think it's one of this beauty, I would say, the challenges that we have all in front of us. But I'm quite positive about this.
I should say thank you very much for this question. Yeah, this is in very front of, let me say, my personal questioning more than answering. So maybe that I will put some more questions to your list. But on one hand, maybe that I can start with what Dr. Rüdgers, who unfortunately had to leave during the break, mentioned today. These are now words from us old guys, so to say. This is a kind of sentimentalism of the 90s. But first of all, I'm sure that you know, Europe and European Union of this decade, second decade of new millennium, is much different from the 90s. It is unfortunately much different in cultural philosophies as well as in political philosophies. I can't hide here that I fear what is going on in Europe today, in sense of, for example, ethnic minorities. Yeah, it's maybe the most known case is the case of Hungary and the Roma population, but as in my country, it is only the case of 10,000 Roma people. The same problem is also with us. And we believed in the 90s that education can be the most strong instrument to approach and to solve this issue. So in this sense, if we list Bologna documents, you will see in the Bologna Declaration itself, the second paragraph, one after the preambula, is saying all this, what we are saying today, is even more important in the light of conflicts, wars in the Western Balkans area. We are both coming from this area, more to the north, but we know the situation quite well. And this was actually on the agenda. Higher education is here to strengthen, of course, competitiveness and so on of our economies. Of course, without running economies, we are all dead. However, higher education is much more than that. And I fear that this much more is disappearing in common European mind of today. So to give maybe two would be perhaps more than enough examples that something nevertheless can be made, I will tell you two personal anecdotes. Yeah, on the level of anecdotes, it is the easiest way to respond this kind of questions because they are very often personal. I was invited by the European Commission, the Council of Europe, I think it was in 2005 or 2006, for a very special mission to the Bosnia and Herzegovina country. You know Bosnia and Herzegovina, mixed population, so on. Last but not least, yesterday I had the chance to walk over Jerusalem for half an hour, maybe 1 hour, and I found a parallel to Sarajevo. Yeah, in Sarajevo, in a square of 500 meters, you can find all four main religions: Catholic, Orthodox, Muslim, and Jewish. But today, unfortunately, after these terrible wars, it's much different in Sarajevo. So why I mention this? The special mission was to help Bosnian Universities Federation to reconstruct a rectors' conference. Believe me, this was a real challenge. And we approached this challenge quite seriously. There was one guy from France, there was one guy from Germany, and me, as somebody who speaks local languages and knows local habits. And we spent 1 year to get all these people around the table. But when they were gathered, it proved that academic people are still avant-garde in this sense. There were no problems between them. And it was very easy, and we succeeded at the end. Rectors' Conference began to operate, I think, in 2008 or 2009. Yeah, it's operative now somehow. Yeah, what was the problem? The problem were pressures from political parties to academics. When Muslim and so to say, let me explain in religious terms, Muslim, Orthodox, and Catholic sit together at the table, and they are academics. It's not difficult to make a deal. But it was very difficult to convince local political elites that this is important not only for Europe and for the country, but it is important for local levels. Your university down somewhere in the province is nothing if you do not have this frame surround. And the second point, which I like very much, have you heard about Southeast European University in Tetova, Macedonia? It's so to say rural part of the Balkans, and the Balkan is rural part of Europe. Nevertheless, I'm member of the governing board at this university since a couple of years. How I decided? I was invited as a visiting professor to give 1 week course and so on. And it's very warm country like here. So there was a cafeteria for the staff with climate, air condition, and I went there for a coffee. And I noticed there are 2 guys, professors, disputing extremely, empathetic to a certain issue. It looked like a kind of hard dispute. And I moved a little bit closer to understand what they are talking about. One of them was speaking Macedonian language, which is not too far to our languages, so we understand them somehow. And the other one was talking in Albanian, which is to us incomprehensible. Dialogue was bilingual. They didn't need a translator, you see? So cultural, religious, whatever differences are not important from that point of view. And in this sense, I believe that these institutions and the academic arena can make a lot to this. However, there are these better or worse external environments. Just to finish, fortunately, during the Balkan Wars, my country was outside of fire and smoke. And this was 1901, 1902, and those years. And very often, we invited academic colleagues from the region to come to us, to have panels, to have dialogue, and so on. And it was never difficult. And these were always good debates. And what is most important, this was academic pressure, not to the local governments, because it was impossible. They were in fire. But to Brussels and to Washington, you need to do something. You need to come and help to make peace in the region. And you see that there are people of goodwill who can contribute. And I'm still a defender of this idea, and I hope for better in next years.
A brief comment that that in our home in Israel there are Arab citizens, and education is a bridge between the Arab citizens and the Jewish citizens. The Technion has, for the last 10 years, put in place a program to encourage Arab students to come to the Technion, to help them to stop the dropout rates, and it's been a great success. And it's changed the whole perception of the Technion in the Arab community, whether it's in the northern Galilee. So it's not international, I agree, but bringing together cultures is an important function of education, and I think we have to always pay attention to it.
Yes, is it on the subjects we were discussing, or?
I have a comment motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just, through the process, I have the pleasure of leading a campus program, Do It, which is trying to promote multicultural education and cultural diversity training in teacher in academic institutions. We have 7 countries, 21 institutions, and just the process of collaboration on the international level.
the knowledge that we gain and the experience that we share just through the collaborative process with other cultures and even within Israel, that we have Sachnin, which is as our partners, and K College, which has a large Arab population, or with our partners in Georgia and Tbilisi, and they have a whole range of different colleges, from those close to the Armenian border to those in the middle of the city, and to have our German partners and our Austrian partners and the UK partners. This whole collaborative process, it's more than 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 10. And it's a very exciting experience. So what does Israel have to gain, and Israeli academics, as we have to gain, is the whole collaborative process of working together. And it's what I called in a previous presentation, the breakdown of the baboon mentality, in which you're protecting your knowledge and your specialty, and it's letting it and sharing with others, knowing that you all can gain, and it's not a win-loss situation, but a win-win. And I think this is one of the most important, what Israel can gain, is turning their mind to a win-win rather than win-lose.
Thank you, Rhonda.
I have a question about the ECTS system, and what are the chances of advancing it in the Israeli universities? Whether it can be accepted instead of our existing system or alongside our existing system.
I think, Sarah, I'll let you field that as a start.
Okay, yeah, I'm
and I may
talking
add a
about
comment.
accreditation. I think one of the major contributions of entering more seriously the Bologna process in Israel is, first of all, that we will have an accreditation system between the Israeli higher education institutions, which is non-existent. And many of my European friends, when they hear it, they are really astonished. Because if somebody studies at the Technion, even at the Technion or Hebrew University, it's not obvious that he is going to get accredited in Tel Aviv University or in Ben-Gurion University and so on. But this is one of the major contributions that it can do to the Israeli system. But Moshe knows that we are speaking a lot about the ECTS, and there was kind of also a little bit a scandalous Bashar meeting, in which I informed that in Vilnius, when we had the meeting of UNICA in Vilnius and also in Budapest, that they declared that until 2015, they hope that all the participating countries in the Bologna process, including Georgia and Armenia, and now also I understand Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and so on, will adopt the Bologna process, the ECTS, and also the learning outcomes, and also the diploma supplement. And if students will apply from other countries, this is how I understood it, will apply from other countries, there will not be, if their diplomas will not be exactly like the Bologna process asks, it will not be they will not have to consider them. It doesn't mean that they will automatically accredit all the diplomas, but they will even not relate to them. And then here in the Council of Higher Education, we are in the HERE committee, Higher Education Reform Experts. They were alarmed by my kind of report, and they sent 3 different emails to Belgium to ask whether this is the case. And they answered that countries that will not be exactly in the Bologna process, obviously their diplomas will look different. But nevertheless, I think Israel should enter the ECTS and the Bologna process. Now, the ECTS, the European Credit Transfer System, is exactly an academic currency. It's not substitute our credits or units or whatever we call it, because we do not have one academic currency, but just to make, sorry for the word harmonization, but it's exactly, when you look at diplomas, it's like say that if you have units or hourly semester hours, then it equals to so-and-so ECTS. This is what everything that we have to do. And at the Open University, I once headed the accreditation committee for 17 years, and now it was decided, even by our president, that we are going to award all of our students a diploma that will be also with ECTS, European ECTS, learning outcomes, and the supplement, diploma supplement, and I hope it will happen within 2 years at Hebrew University, at the Open University. I know Ami Shalit is here. He started it already in Weizmann Institute, and some faculties in Hebrew University, like the School of, not medicine, but the dental, and also in Ben-Gurion and so on. So it's moving, but too slowly.
I would just like to add a technical comment to your question, because you asked whether it could be introduced instead of or alongside. And I think this is a very important distinction in our Tempest program, Corinthium, which was just concluded recently. Part of the content of the project was to introduce on an experimental basis ECTS in the institutions participating. And we clearly proposed that the experiment test whether ECTS could be introduced, implemented alongside the existing system. Because certainly at present in Israel, in the current climate, it's absurd to even think of attempting formally in a university to replace the existing system with the ECTS. The experiment, in a sense, was very successful because we were able to demonstrate that it is possible to introduce the ECTS alongside the existing, more or less American-based credit system. And this is a very important finding because there are conflicts that arise when it's done. But as we've already heard from almost all our speakers today, Bologna is not a perfectly harmonized, closed system. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We had a speaker last year at our first conference who made a very interesting observation. Johanna Vita, for those of you who were at the conference and remember her, said that there are 47 roads to Bologna. And this is a very important observation because I think every country, in preservation of its variability and uniqueness, has to find its own road to Bologna. But going back to your question, we did find in our project that it is possible within a department to implement the ECTS system alongside the existing credit system, excuse me, and that they could live together. I'd like to move on a bit, and then we'll come back to more questions. I think there was one question here, though. Yes.
My name is Alain Zetoun. I am leading a French immigrant and a UK and US immigrant association in Israel. And working a lot with a team of Ministry of Education, which is here together, about the problems of non-implementation of Bologna by France in particular, which is very late in the... What I'd like to address is, following Professor Zgaga presentation, is how far is the freedom to movement of people far down in the consideration why Bologna is to implement. I'd like to suggest that it should be one of the first ones. We're in a modern world when everybody's moving all around, and one of the first objectives, without affecting wrongly the universities, should be that people are moving around in different countries, and non-implementation of Bologna today by some countries are becoming a real barrier to freedom of the citizen. So would you see that way, and what do you advise to do to Israel to make also Israeli citizens more able to move around the world with their diplomas?
If I may, since this question fits directly into the next question that I wanted to put to the panel, it's difficult to separate the two issues. I'd like to reserve the answer to that question until I put the next question, if I may. The next issue that I want to put to the entire panel is that the following. It is generally agreed I think, today in Israel, that Israel's higher education system should engage the European higher education area and the global issues facing higher education. And of course, there's a question, how should this be done? Is it best to wait for central leadership and direction from the government, from the Council for Higher Education, as has been the case in many European countries? Should our higher education institutes set out on their own in the absence of any central leadership or direction in this area? Or perhaps the universities or different institutions should band together to find a solution. How do you see this? And also in parallel, since Bologna is continuing to develop dynamically, how do you see the Bologna process evolving in Europe? And how can a country like Israel, in planning to adjust, to engage Bologna, keep up with this dynamic process? I think your question fits into that area, and once again, perhaps we'll begin with you, Melita.
Whoever. Yeah, we may. I would say, probably you remember I mentioned what happened in some countries, and this includes my country, that the system started from top down. So we signed the Bologna Declaration in 2001. Then we had some kind of time for preparation, which actually everyone was crossing fingers and said, no, it will never happen. We don't care. You know, this is some ideas that are coming from somewhere, and we will not have to do it. Then at once, it was a very short period of time. It was like, okay, we have to start with the new programs. I think it was 2005. And then everything happened suddenly. But there was no really engagement or enough engagement from bottom up. So professors, students, there was no enough quantity of good quality information on disposal. This is one perspective that I would like to say. What was interesting at the same time, we did start with the changes with the doctoral education before we started with bachelor and master level. And this turned out to be some kind of good movement. And of course, some universities, at least I can say my university as a big and research university, recognized this as an opportunity, and we did good job. Fairly good job. Still, I think we are now in the process of rethinking what we did, and we are changing some things. So this was an unusual approach. If we look at, I think, Slovenian side did a little bit differently. We all started with all Bologna process in all programs, I mean bachelor and master at the same time. So everyone had to stop what we did before, and we all started with a new system at once. Slovenia did differently. Austria, for example, was also the country which has still maybe 2 years ago some of the leftovers of the old system. So two things. First thing is that the processes could be different in terms of time of preparation, top down, bottom up, but it also could be different in a way who do it at which level, and the question everyone at once or in some kind of cascadic or what kind of different approach. So this is one of the issues. Personally, I think that it should be done both ways. The best, to have some policymakers who will support the whole system, but if there is if you have to choose, I would say it's more important to have it from bottom up, and then to get the support on the policy level, then to have only on the policy level and not to have a proper way from bottom up. I think if we make analysis, and this is like my private analysis, each country which did it the way I'm suggesting actually did it much better. Every country, if you look at those who did it top down, did not do it from the very beginning way they wanted. My example with the doctoral education, we did it on our own. This was our university decision. It wasn't a decision top down, and it actually turned out to be a good qualitative movement. So this is one of the things. In terms of the time when it's happening, my impression is, but this is some kind of analogy that we can do with anything else. Although always those who are the very first one doing something, they always have the trial error methodology. And you always, when you go backwards, you say, oh, if I were at that time, if I knew something, I would do it differently. So I think that you or Israel, a higher education system, could take advantage of the fact that maybe you did not start from the very beginning, for whatever reasons this happened, and take advantage of the collection of information that you can get from very different kind of resources and analysis and research that has been done, and actually then find your 48th road how to do it, adjusting to your own context. And I think this is the best way. So in other way, I think you can still catch up what was happening and maybe to use it in the best way. But the decision has to be done, whatever level you choose.
One more point. You do need more resources to implement, because we hear all the time about France. They have to make, they don't have resources. The university is poor, and say, well, this is our last priority.
Yeah.
So how much more resources did you need?
I think that Professor Zgaga will love to answer this question, but I can tell you again, if we look in 47 countries, many of the countries did not get additional financial resources. Of course, this is not good. I don't believe that you can make any kind of reform without having additional funding system. Of course, because in some countries has been done top-down, authorities would like to say you have to do it and you don't need money for that. I mean, this happened in some countries. But again, I don't think that there's a complete answer only in the funding system, especially, I mean, and including French universities. I don't know that, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on French universities, but I know quite a number of universities. I have colleagues and I know how they did it. It wasn't just a question of money, it was also a question of, let's say, academic mentality or whatever, ideas. So it wasn't just money. But I think you do need some money.
Just one more thing. We just tried to get the diploma supplement for immigrants from France. And I hope by the next month we will get the first diploma supplement from France in English presented to our colleagues of the Ministry of Education. To make this happen, we had to go to the Ministry of Education in France. That was lobbied by a lot of deputies and a lot of senators, until she got enough pressure to say to the university, we want not to move. University, suddenly we had the movement, well, in English, why should we do in English?
Yeah.
So the big French, so we created a big mess of English now.
Yeah.
Why should we do in English? Now they got it in English, but only when there was pressure. So the top-down sometimes is needed to unlock situations which are really locked in the field.
Yeah.
So to make the implementation. So this is what we see today, and I hope that only when, the same person going to the university to ask a diploma supplement because she's coming to Israel as an engineer or anything, 1 year request, nothing moved. Suddenly, the head of the conference of president of university sent an email to the president of university and said, why didn't you say before? 1 week after it was already in process. So at one time, there is no solution. Sometimes the top dot is needed.
Yeah, I took this as a rhetoric comment. So, yeah, thank you.
No. I believe really in the case of Israel, it should be really done at the beginning, not at the beginning, because some universities already, as I said, started it bottom up. But it should, because we have the Council of Higher Education, which is a buffer institute that does not exist in many European countries. But it's a very important in kind of for decision making here. And it is not enough engaged. I see Marisa is staying there from the Council of Higher Education. It's still not yet decided that it really wants to enact these things. So basically, and the major rejection is sometimes it's really humorous, because the major rejection that they are afraid universities will reject it because it is top down from the Council of Higher Education. But they do a lot of decisions, this is more administrative. It's not intervening in anything that has to do with the content of the academic programs. So they do a lot of things which are much more intervention into what universities and colleges do, but in this case, they refrain from doing things. And my feeling is that if they will not take action, it will really not spread into all higher education institutes. We are asking for the diploma supplement. The diploma supplement is something like a page or 2 pages, something describing the higher education system. It should be done by the Council of Higher Education. I can do it in 1 day, but they really have to do it. It's already a year and a half, 2 years that we're asking for this diploma supplement. We are not getting it. So basically.
The French don't want to do it because they don't have university computerized. You know, so they have to go to the archion, take out the diploma of a person and write it down. So this I can understand. But at least Israel, I can say, is fully computerized.
Yes, it can be done. Yes, Ami wants to say something.
As I said a couple of months ago in a presentation, the fact that presidents, rectors, vice rectors, and deans in many universities and colleges are not aware of the Bologna process at all. And they were quite surprised to hear Sarah Guri's and my presentation there, and they're quite shocked. How come we don't know about it? How come we're not involved? Marisa from the Tempus office, from the Council of Education, actually, it's interesting. The lower level management at the Council of Higher Education is pushing for it, and it's actually, they recruited me. You know, I knew nothing about, I'm the director of the Final Graduate School of the Weizmann Institute of Science. I knew nothing about it. I thought it was complete playing on Bologna. It's Bologna. But after I was introduced, I've been introduced to the whole concept and the ideas, I was quite taken. And for a few years now, I'm trying to learn more and be more involved. And actually, we are in the process of implementing that at the Weizmann Institute of Science, again, with the help of the center, the Bologna Center, the Ben-Gurion, and many others here in Israel. So I know the paper was that we talked about, the description of the education, higher education in Israel is ready for a couple of years now. But for some reason, it's been sent from one committee to another, and nobody wants to touch it. So bottom up is the right way to do it. Definitely when you deal with institutional higher learning. Otherwise, they'll reject it flatly. You know, my secretary, I told the story, my secretary, last summer we decided to implement the learning outcomes for all the courses. I said to my secretary, the one who is responsible for course, we only 200 courses. We are a small research institute. And I said to her, we are not going to publish the course without the learning outcomes. So that's a no-no. So she found a few professors who did not want to cooperate for their own reasons. And she said to them, it's directed by the Council of Higher Education. Big mistake. Of course, they said, in this case, forget it. So I had to come back and said, no, it's my initiative. I want to do it. It's good for our students when they're going to go abroad so they can get some accreditation, so on and so forth. It's just the beginning of the process. And of course, it took me a few minutes and I convinced them. The fact that I said the Council of Higher Education has nothing to do with it was a plus. But the Council of Higher Education must take position and support the bottom-up initiative, provide financial assistance, provide guidance, bring experts. What we do now is we have the Herzliya, the college, the IDC, the Herzliya. They've brought some experts. The Ben-Gurion Center brings some experts. So it's with the help of Tempus and the European Union. But it's not done in a national way. It's done like a club, and that's a mistake. So we're all for it, and we all want to do it, and it's here to stay. And if we're going to ignore it, it's going to ignore us at the end. And that's what I'm afraid of, and that's the problem. And I think we should really start talking to the presidents and the rectors of the universities and make them aware of it and get them act, hopefully with success, when they talk to the National Council of Education.
Thank you, Ami. You can become the spokesman for the Bologna Training Center. Yes, Marisa.
I just want to quickly add, because there's discussion about the role of the council. The council has actually just established a committee to discuss globalization and internationalization its role and Israel's role in these processes. The question of the Council's role in the Bologna process has not been consolidated. They don't know their exact role, and this is one of the issues that will be discussed within this committee, how the Council is going to help, if it's its role to help the institutions. It's something that has just started. It will be headed by the Director General of the Council, and hopefully they will have a report with recommendations within the next 6 months. So this is something that will be discussed, but again, it's unclear what the Council's role will be in the process and how much it's going to encourage it on a top-down basis or just support the institutions that are interested in doing it.
Thank you. Just if we can hold on, I didn't give Professor Zgaga an opportunity to respond to this issue. I think we should let him do so, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, that's another vulnerable relationship is addressed with this question. I would like to start with quoting from von Humboldt again. We heard about him today, at least once. Actually, in the famous paper he wrote just before establishing the Universität in Berlin, he wrote in that paper something like that. On one hand, the king should leave academics alone to do research and to do teaching, because academics can do it in the best way. If the king intrudes into these issues, this will be bad both for teachers and students as well as for the king. However, on the other hand, there are framework conditions, and the king should strengthen his power in this area. So this is what we still understand. Every country has a higher education law, legislation, national system, and so on in place. And on the other hand, institutions and academics should do their business as better as possible. We do not have so many kings today. Well, some nations do, or maybe looks like. But what is the real problem to me? It is the gray zone between these two areas, where the king starts to intrude and where academics starts to intrude into the king's affairs. That's, I think, the most problematic issue of today. Basically, in cases of higher education reforms, I'm in favor of bottom-up changes, not top-down. The Bologna process and implementation of the Bologna process in Europe, we can prove very well that all those countries with strict top-down approach actually in certain regard failed. Personally, this is to me the main reason why your country is in red colors on my paper. With us in Slovenia, yes, it was different. The first move was that we made ECTS voluntary, acceptable to institutions. So, if you at your university would like to do that, there is a special fund at the ministry, and we will support your action. But we do not intrude, and we do not force all universities. Yeah. And what we did, it was very difficult because it is always a fight for money, you know. We paid these first tickets into Erasmus very early, earlier than other Eastern countries. And it was quite a high sum of money. But why? When people are involved in Erasmus projects, Tempus is a little bit different. Yeah? When you are in Erasmus, then you need to change your mentality, your opinion, your structures, and so on. Otherwise, you can't operate. Otherwise, you are a loser. So again, no top-down approach, but make the framework which stimulates people. So this is what I would say. But however, yes, there is another question, resources. institutions can't do that unless they are profit universities. But I'm a little bit skeptical about their role in this particular field we are discussing today. We used, I think, in a good way, resources from the European Social Fund. This is a special foundation within European Union, which includes also such aims like human resource development and similar. And a lot of money was spent from that source to improve this modernization of structures, tools, and so on. So, however, I would say that all practice from my country could not be classified as good practice. Here I should add to what Melita just said. Yes, there are different approaches by different countries, but there are different approaches by the same countries within a longer period. In particular with, let me say, some serious changes at the position of the Minister for Higher Education. And then you can come from one option to another. So we also experienced top-down recently, very recently, a few years ago, approach to these issues, which resulted most probably to many of those severe criticisms of today. In particular in the case that universities are forced to do modernization, but from the money they receive annually from the state. So do more with less. The famous proverb of nowadays. You can't do more with less in this particular region. Here, either the authority should support in certain way, not necessarily from the state budget. The European Social Fund is such a case. But there should be a firm agreement that this money does not go to new highways in the country, but to knowledge, to science, to education.
Thank you. Tzipi, you wanted to ask a question. Oh.
Say something important, okay? And I know that Marisa, not Marisa, I think Shira, she already sent emails, yes, to the universities and the colleges to invite you all to register in my office, okay, with my email. If you want to get my email, please turn to me and I'll give you the email. I think it's really very important that those experts, whoever is interested, those experts will really explain everything about the changes in the higher education, in Europe, the Bologna process and everything, the ECTS, whatever is interesting. And so come to me and I'll give you my email, and if you are interested, I'll register you. Now, it's very important to tell you that the EU still hasn't approved this TAIEX, okay? We're waiting for their answer. But please, there was a very good response from the ministry, from other ministries, like the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of, now it's called the Ministry of Economy, and other ministries as well. So if you want to get involved, please come and register. Thanks.
I would like to, Tzipi, I would like to make a comment or perhaps a suggestion concerning what you just said. Because this is an initiative of the Ministry of Education, you're probably in a position to reach certain audiences that we have much more difficulty in reaching. And if you could arrange a session or a workshop for the leadership of the universities to get them, because again I say, because it's a ministry initiative, they might come if they were invited by the Ministry of Education and do a session for them on what's happening in higher education and Bologna. It would be an enormous contribution. We in the Bologna Training Center, for example, are able to reach people on the ground in colleges and universities throughout the country, but it's very difficult for us to reach the rectors, the presidents, vice rectors, deans of the universities. That's just a suggestion for your consideration. I'd like to open the floor to other questions and comments before I put one of my own questions to Professor Zgaga. Please.
I have a second question. I was inspired by Professor Feiglin talking about the graduates of the Technion who are becoming talented innovators and therefore a resource for the cities they are going to. And I'm coming from a teachers' college, and large part of this audience is coming from such institutions. How do you see the character or the profile of the graduates of such programs in Europe? What change of the graduate of the university you've seen after following the Bologna process? If they are becoming innovators or people of global scopes or horizons or things like that.
Please.
I think that there is no one-fit-all response to this question. But mainly I would say that a question would depend very much on which university you address. With the Bologna process, there is certain process of diversification of institutions in Europe and also in countries. And it is obvious that today some universities are growing towards global or maybe only European or perhaps regional, and some of them believe that their future is, let me say, to be strong local university and so on and so forth. So it depends on their roles very much. But on the other hand, it is a question how much internationalized they are. So how many international flow there is. I think this influence is very much graduates. And from now, I would say here that in my personal teaching practice, I think that Erasmus program is far the most important factor in this graduates' mentality shift. We have also at my department, it's interesting, my faculty is, we are in teacher education and education sciences positioned. This was a very weak area 10 or 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there were no movements in this area at all. So this was purely national. And now we are, I think, the fifth faculty within university, and our university consists of 25. So we are top in mobility, in Erasmus. And these students come back from their Erasmus semester already changed. Yeah? In particular, it is in particular important in terms, for example, in multiculturalism, what we discussed earlier. And if, as most of them are future teachers or future counselors, or let me say, they will work in different educational authorities and so on, I think it is important that their mentality shifted, so that they understand that education is not only education about these local problems and so on, but that a new generation, kids of tomorrow, need this broader. In this sense, I am optimist. However, on the other side, how individual institutions are diversifying, that's another issue, and we could have another panel on that.
I'd just like to shortly add, I mean, besides what Professor Zgaga said, I think what you ask is actually about innovation and transfer technology. And I think that this is an issue, I mean, what I knew about Israel before coming here, and I'm just confirming what I already knew, that you are really doing exceptionally well in terms of transfer technology innovation. I mean, it's just, you know, it's knowledge that everyone who is academia and this share, and this is the fact. When we go back to the States, it's again the similar thing. Those research universities or institutions are doing extremely well on transfer technology or innovation. When it comes to Europe, Europe is in a different position. Again, this is like an old lady which is waking up and changing the attitude. So European universities, many of the institutions actually were put in a position, some institutions 10 years ago, some 20 years ago, but still we are talking about shorter period of time, learning that universities today do need to have the third role, it's innovation. And if you look in a European scene right now, you have some of the institutions doing, again, quite well. You have those who are waking up, sleeping beauties are waking up, and you have still those who are in a deep sleep and happy. They're not still aware that they're not happy at all. Okay, so, and this is again, you know, you look at different areas and you see different institutions. And I think that this is a partial answer to your question. What I would like to in particular to say, and this is what I learned recently, we had an Israel delegation in Zagreb, and they were giving, in between other things, presentations at my own universities, and what I learned, that you developed extremely sophisticated system, at least what the information that I collected, of actually putting creative thinking and thinking about innovation, not starting at the university level, but actually intertwine it from very early age. And this is what I think, where it comes, higher education reform, as extremely point that you need kind of vertical change into the system. As long as we are focused only on higher education, we cannot actually reach the point where we would like to be in 2037, for example. So we have to really think from the kindergarten what to do in order to be in 2037, what kind of things we would like to have.
Thank you. Hila? Eric, sorry, I didn't see.
Some of us have been following the Bologna process for several years now, part of Tempest, part of Erasmus, whatever. And we've had a discussion a few moments ago whether we need in Israel a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. And I ask, why do we need either? And I'll explain my question. I mean, what is it that we expect from the government? In other words, if I agree with Moshe, and I do agree with Moshe, that we've come to a determination that Bologna, in its practical terms, ECTS, diploma supplement learning outcomes, is something that will have to live alongside the current Israeli system of credit. What do we need from our government? In other words, we're adopting it on a voluntary basis. So long as we're not expecting to change the system, but to have two systems living side by side, what is it that we need from the government? We don't need any approach. We're 65, give or take 65 institutions of higher education in Israel. Some of us are more progressive when it comes to looking outward, and we have more developed study abroad programs, for instance, or more developed international schools, and some of us have less developed. Those of us who have better developed systems are looking to Bologna naturally. Those of us who are not yet there, either because of issues of capacity or desire or geography or whatever, are not there. So is my question understood? Maybe our European colleagues can help me understand, do we have to be pushing our government at all to help us make any determination, or whether this has to be, in Israel's case, a voluntary adoption of those Bologna tools that fit us. We don't necessarily have to adopt Bologna. We're in a perfect position. We can take what we want. It's a smorgasbord. We can take what we want, and we can ignore what's not relevant for us.
Let me just second the motion partly. I think that universities won't adopt the principles or the ideas behind the Bologna process because of a decree or a government or a Council of Higher Education. It has to be good for the university. And as you said, those that realize it sooner will act sooner, and those that realize it later will act later. And we've just gone through a process in the Technion of reviewing our undergraduate education, and it's clear that what we're going to do is set up courses based on learning outcomes and and do the translation to the CTS, because that's part of the process. When you ask about resources, we realize that we have to put resources in, whether they'll come from the government or whether they'll come from our internal resources. You need resources because you need to manage the system. Even if every professor is prepared to do his bit for his course, you need to put it all together and package it, and you have to, there's an administrative overhead here that isn't trivial, and we have to take that into account.
Personally, when I was speaking earlier about bottom-up, I thought actually in similar terms as you did now. So I believe that there should be quite a lot of freedom for institutions, and that changes should be made on voluntary basis. At least this should be the first step, not the contrary. The contrary is bad. However, and as we just heard, there is also the reverse side of this coin. One side is, of course, the issue of funding. With, let me say, very, very ambitious internationalization scheme, an institution comes to certain troubles. And if these aims of internationalization are important for the country, then the minister should know that. But it is not only the Minister of Education. In Europe, we are discussing quite often the issue. It was a question earlier. I can respond partly also to this one, freedom of mobility. Now, with these changes, in particular during the last decade, the flow of, in particular, immigrants from Asia and from Africa, the regulation of these newcomers is more and more strict. We are part of the Schengen area. And half a year ago, it was approved that I have a PhD student from October at my university. He is coming from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. You can't imagine what a trouble to get him into the country legally. On one hand, there are famous documents on the EU level, as well as on the my country level, that we are going towards knowledge society, blah, 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 blah. And then, when we informed the Ministry of Higher Education, everything was okay, bravo, good guys. And now we have severe problems with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because there is a number of documents to be done to get that Schengen visa. Yeah, so I believe that it is maybe more difficult today than it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. And now you need to make a real proof that this is a normal person, an academic, a PhD student, who is not a terrorist, and so on and so forth. So this is what I think also calls for cooperation between higher education institutions and governments. And quite often, at the governmental level, they simply don't understand. They don't know what it is about. They produce this regulation because they don't think in terms, there are academics, there are future PhDs, there are postdocs, and we need to adapt rules to this condition. So in one way, yes, universities should have as much as initiative as possible, but these good initiatives may be blocked if there is not a constant and productive relationship with the government, with all ministries, not only with Ministry of Higher Education or Research.
Thank you. Wait. Someone was before you. Carlos, you had a question or a comment.
There were different subjects. Carlos Machado from Freie Universität Brussels and Göttingen University. And it was related to, I'm glad that Humboldt was mentioned before, because it was said that Humboldt is dead. It's not dead, I think he's well alive. Humboldt system is well alive and kicking, and maybe that's one of the problems. I will explain. Since the beginning of the Bologna process, end of the 80s, beginning of 90s, one of the critiques to the Bologna system was the mercantilization of studies and the link to the labor market. It's all related also to different policies, also to the creation of the Erasmus Mundus, Erasmus program, in the sense of creating sort of European labor force. Now the question is, also, this is a top-down approach. We've seen that employability is a key word, it's a buzzword, and is taking more role and importance in the policy-making agenda of higher education. We have seen it in the Leuven communique, now in the Bucharest communique also. So it's also given the turbulences that is right now in the European economical space. So the question is this one. There are two questions then, in fact. One is employability an end or a mean for higher education? And employability is a point for convergence or divergence between Israeli higher education system and the European one? So, two questions.
Ami?
I fully agree with Eric. I mean, we can't expect much of the government, and it's good that we're doing on a voluntary basis with our own enthusiasm and what we learn, and we try to implement it. I don't, when I started getting involved in that, I figured that we are not going to make it's not going to make any difference in the way we teach. It's not going to make any difference in the way we do our science and research. We teach in English all our courses. Our scientists win a lot of grants in Europe and elsewhere. Our students excel. But looking ahead and reading some of the history, let's say in the United States and other places, I realized that one day, if we're not going to act now, our graduates and our scientists are going to suffer. How come? They will come to Europe to do their postdocs, or they want to do a PhD after they do the master's, and they will have trouble in getting recognition accreditation. They might get trouble with that. And there is nothing worse than you as the director of the school have to justify to somebody else that you're good and that the student did well. And why won't you accept him? Because he has 2 science papers, one nature paper, I don't know, and whatever else, PRLs in physics and so on and so forth. And this is pathetic. So I want to make sure that I create an infrastructure that will eliminate that problem. That's on the student side. Thinking of the scientist, I think with the scarce of, well, everybody's looking for funding for research and equipment and everything else. So the funds are very slightly growing, if at all, but the demands are multiplying. So there is going to be a competition. And when you have a competition, you have to decide. It's nice to decide on quality and so on and so forth, but you want to make sure that you eliminate many of the competitors because they do not answer some technical things. And one of those, and some of those technical things, I envisage, I predict, I may be wrong, but I think that will happen, will be, one, do you have the Bologna process? Do you have the ECTS? Do you have the learning outcome? What about the diploma supplements? Do you follow this? Do you follow that? And it will happen. And it will always happen when nobody is ready. So, for instance, a few years ago, 10 years ago, when I started at Weizmann, I got a call at home late in the weekend. How come you don't have a course on ethics? Why is it so urgent? Because I have by 12 o'clock tonight to submit a research grant application to, I think it was the NIH or whatever it was, and one of the requirements was to prove that that institution has a course on ethics. And I was the one, the dean of the school, and I were to blame for the fact that that scientists were not able to submit that grant on a technical thing. The fact that a few years later they wanted 2 or 3 million euros in the ERC, I mean, it's not a question of quality, it's a question of technical things. And this is why I'm involved. I'm not involved because it's fun. Well, it's fun actually because you meet a lot of interesting people along the way, but it's not because that you have to invest in the future. And what I expect of the government is to think and not to, we don't need the government. I mean, if the Bologna process would accept institutions, nobody would need the government. But the only problem is that you need the minister to sign the Bologna process, not the president of the Weizmann or the IDC or the Hebrew, whatever. So So that's to answer.
Weitzman always had ethics. Adi?
Hi, Adi Kahani from Ministry of Education, Israeli National Center of Information for Education, or as it's called, ANIC. I want to know, I want to hear your personal opinion on the Erasmus for All program in regard to the higher education part, now that it's going to be soon implemented next year, because being one of the programs which has the Bologna process tools as part of it. Thank you.
Well, there are several questions now in the floor. With Erasmus, I think that we need to start from the fact this is an old program scheme within European Union countries. You know about that. It's 1986, 1987 it started. And from that time on, there was every year a substantial increase in students exchanged and a substantial increase in funds, in European funds. In addition to European funds, every country should have its own burse. And last but not least, the family, parents, because funds from the European Union are far from being enough for these 3 or 4 months. And what is important it is that just these days, I don't know, maybe next week, the European Parliament and the Council, the European Council, we should not mix the European Council with the Council of Europe, these are 2 different institutions. The European Council is, they are the key figures in the European money budget making. And it seems that for the first time in the last 25 years, these funds will be decreased due to crisis in Europe and so on and so forth. So this is part of my answer. We have a lot of concerns. On one hand, it is a real flagship of European higher education, Erasmus, in all its possible appearance forms. Now with Erasmus for all, you know, it's always so that you must cross your fingers if you hear very good slogans like Erasmus for all. Oh my gosh, will it be for all? Indeed. It was the same as the famous sentence from beginning of 2001, I think. Europe will be the most competitive and the most blah blah. You know that, yeah. So and look the crisis of today. So we came to an opposite. So what I'm talking now, these are mainly concerns which have been expressed by many people whom I know during the last year or 2 about the future. So the economic crisis in Europe may importantly influence, and these big expectations can of course become a source of big troubles. We cannot afford to download the size of mobility we have in Europe. You know that the new benchmark for 2020 is 20% of students who should have at least some international experience. And at the moment, best performing institutions are not at this level, not to say about countries. So in this case, I am very much interested what we will get from the parliamentary debate in Brussels. I think these days, until the summer break, I hope for the best, but do not be, better to say, wait until the autumn and then we can discuss on this again. It is in certain troubles. Its future is in troubles today.
Thank you. Do you want to?
I'd like to maybe to answer to the question about employability issue. I think that this is an issue that universities have to, and higher education institutions in general, have to be very careful. On one side, it's absolutely, I think, a must to make students, those who graduate from any kind of degree, any kind of level, employable in terms of what they have to have a skills and kind of knowledge, competencies that they can fit to some kind of jobs. But we shouldn't forget, I'm not sure if I have right numbers at the moment, but I think that there is an estimation that by 2020 there will be 1 million new types of jobs. So I mean those that are going to retire and leave certain jobs, and then the requirement of new type of jobs is going to tremendously increase. In other words, if you match those kind of information, then it's clear that universities cannot, and they never did, create a final product, I mean final outcome of education to fit particular kind of job, but to make flexible system and those who graduate be able to fit to different requirements. So we have to be very careful. Why I'm saying this, because there could be a tendency or misinterpretation of this kind of statements, and universities could see themselves, and this could go from those less developed countries, less developed or not so good institutions, to try to fit what they make in terms of the content to fit to the clear outcome. This has to do something with autonomy in creating jobs and a very wise way of creating curriculum which will enable actually long life learning diplomas which will fit to the need that will come in 10, 15, 20 years and so on. So I think this is a very sensitive issue. On the other side, the fact is, as I said, we need, again, estimation is 40% of jobs will require higher education. We are far away from reaching this percentage of those who will have a higher education diploma. So again, we have to match in between numbers and the content and the quality of those numbers matching to the needs. So this is an issue. And what I also wanted to say just very shortly, when we talk about Bologna and needs and reasons why to follow Bologna or not, and what does it mean, and what Ami was mentioning, okay, we need the ethics in order to be compatible with something else that is happening. I think that the Bologna also gives you perfect framework of some kind of matching collaboration. And then by matching collaboration, you actually increase your competitiveness with whomever you choose to be competitive. And this is something also to remember.
Sorry. I think we're all getting a bit tired, but before we conclude, I'd like to invoke my executive privilege and ask a question of my own that's been puzzling me. Professor Zgaga, early in your presentation, one of the comments on one of your first slides was that at the time Bologna was introduced, there was no available system to adopt. And here I have to share a short anecdote with you all. My very first exposure to Bologna was at an Erasmus Mundus workshop in Brussels in 2007. And they had brought a woman from Italy, a Bologna expert, to lecture us on what is Bologna, introduction. I didn't know anything about Bologna at that time. And it was one of those lectures which, if you follow it carefully, and I was paying the utmost attention and following carefully, by the end of the lecture, you're a wet rag, you're exhausted. And when this lecture concluded, I was just sitting back in shock, and I had a friend and colleague next to me who was at that time the dean of the Faculty of Engineering at Khilwan University in Cairo. And he had the same reaction, and we sat back and we just looked at each other for a while. And then he said to me, imagine spending all those billions just in order not to adopt the American system. My question is, and I'm coming back to your slide, Pavel, why was it not possible to adopt the American system and tune it with things that were significantly different, for example, student-oriented learning and the learning outcomes? Why was it that not possible?
Well, basically, the answer to this question is not so difficult. Today, we have used several times in our conversation words like we in Europe and you in Israel and they in US. There is a fundamental mistake in this kind of expression. There is no Europe. That's the point. There is 47, as Marek der Wende told you, as I heard earlier, there is 47 paths to Bologna. And that's the main problem. So if Europe were US, then there would be no problem. Then we have our Ivory League, and we know who they are, yeah, and we know that our universities most probably are not in the Ivory League, but soon after it. The main problem is precisely in that sense. You know, if there are 47, let's focus only to European Union, because if we go beyond European Union, the picture is even more difficult to understand. But if we take these 27 ministers, 28. 28 from 1st of July.
29.
No, I go now just to that, yeah. Then, and if we say, okay, within European Union, we desperately need centers of excellence. And we will establish 5 institutions to compete with ideas of those guys from New York, Haifa, and so on and so forth. After 1 hour of ministerial talk, there will be an amendment, yes, we desperately need it, but not 5, but 28. And that's the problem. And this is why American system, even the best in the world, if you wish, is not adaptable, not feasible for European countries. So there was a problem, and there still is this problem, and this is a problem we encounter, we approach. We need to find certain solutions. In certain cases, we found the solutions. I think that certain elements have been quite well on their path, but on the other hand, we have new problems. Like, for example, the debate in England, in UK, to get out of European Union. This is political debate, but could have many implications for higher education developments as well. So I think that this is simply the most important point. In US, you know, if you are a community college from Nebraska, then you will never be together with Columbia at the table. But you can do your business in Nebraska quite well, nevertheless. You know that this is your mission, you are proud of your institution, as those guys down from Columbia, yeah? But this is not the case in European countries, most of them. Yeah, we can talk both, Melita and me, about troubles we have in these small countries. There are 2 old and famous universities, of course we are coming from these universities, and there is a number of new ones. And whenever we start such a discussion about, for example, the National Excellence Center, after 2 weeks or 3 weeks of political debates, there is, yes, these guys are right. We need one also, and then you listen to a list of provincial cities who also need desperately excellence centers. And this is an enigma which, well, maybe that we came here also to learn how you deal with this, and then come back and maybe have some answer for our people.
When we are talking about anecdotes, I can just add to what Pavel just said. When you talk with people from Great Britain, they say us and Europe.
Thank you both.
Moshe, I wanted also to add something. Like it's also a matter of history. The cradle of universities is Europe. Yeah. The universities were born in Europe, in Bologna and in Paris and in Cambridge and in Oxford. And the feeling is that if United States actually borrowed most of the ideas of university and invented some of its own, like the special research universities and also the community colleges. So the feeling was we are more ancient and we can do it even better than United States. So I think the first initiative was the feeling we can compete with United States and do something better, which really didn't happen. So.
You know, the question arises, is that part of the solution or part of the problem? Paul, did you want to comment?
And at the risk of being very unpopular, I'd say that is part of our problem here in Israel with the establishment of the colleges, who all aspire to be universities instead of fulfilling a very important role as colleges.
If I just may say, this is not Israel, whatever problem or issue, this is universal. And this is what is happening, you know, all over. And again, you know, there are extreme good colleges. And this is what when I was mentioning proliferation of higher education institutions across Europe each day. And then, of course, the question, you know, where is the quality? Because quality could go in any kind of institution, and something what is not of good quality could be also in any kind of, and this is something what is very typical, what is happening right now in the whole Europe. And this is one of the reasons more present why Bologna is one of the vehicles that could help resolving some of issues, in between other things, taking care of a quality, assurance of quality.
Thank you. Like the old expression goes, all good things must come to an end. I think the time has come for me, first of all, to thank our participants. We deeply appreciate your participation, your giving of your time, and particularly coming from another country to visit us. And I would like to thank everyone. It's definitely time to conclude. I would like to thank everyone that came and participated in the, particularly at the end, the animated and dynamic discussions we've had. And we look forward to seeing you all again next year at what we hope will be the 3rd annual International Conference of the Bologna Training Center. Thank you very much.